The location of the Hiveworld had first been discovered through the Dreamers of Gateway Station. The tortured souls had endured dreams, transmissions, really, of the alien Queen Mother, calling her brood home. Newt had gathered the similarities between her dreams and theirs, and decided it may be a puzzle worth piecing together. It was a long shot, but this was the information that began the process of their Hail Mary play, dubbed Operation Arrowhead. Follow the coordinates, find the Mother Queen, capture her and bring her to Earth to lure in her faithful servants, and nuke them all to hell. To call the success of this mission a miracle would be something of an understatement, but this was the turning point in the Earth War. Humanity had taken back its home. Years later, the planet would receive its official designation, G435. Many believed it to be the Xenomorph homeworld, though this was often disputed, and most settled on the name Hiveworld. After all, in the early days of the war, civilian USCM advisor Dr. Arona had believed to have already found the homeworld. That site was eventually nuked from orbit by Corporal Dwayne Hicks, who had led Arona's specimen retrieval operation. There was no telling how many planets had been taken over by the alien plague, though one thing was certain. The Queen Mother Xenomorph, the source of the Earth's infestation, had been on G435. Now, without their matriarch, the remaining aliens on the planet endured a series of unexpected changes and a full-on war for control. A war that Neopharm CEO Daniel Grant and his team would be walking right into, in the search for more of the royal jelly substance, the key ingredient of the wonder drug Xenozip that would make Grant and his corporation rich beyond measure. The mission to the Hiveworld had been long and arduous, with Grant suspecting sabotage along the way, likely from the rival company MedTech. Someone among the team was a traitor. Someone had a vested interest in seeing the mission fail. But Grant had gone too far. The USS Razia had found itself in the orbit of the Hiveworld, and its lander, the Anteater, made its descent. 0 hour approached. The Marines all knew their jobs, but there was a palpable pall of tension and dread in the lander's interior as the soldiers, already garbed in their special acid-neutralizing suits, began to file in. They all carried their carbines and the array of other special weapons in which they specialized. Private Jastro carried something a little extra. His saxophone. "Hey, nice choice of weapons," said Milhone, attempting a smile. "Maybe you can scare the crickets off with your lousy playing." "Eat it, Milhone," said Jastro. "You never know when I'm going to need to unwind." Milhone turned to Ellis. "What the hell's up his butt?" "Grant took away his Xenozip, and he's on edge," said Ellis. "Playing music helps him relax, so cool it, all right?" Edie Milhone nodded. "Sorry, guys. I'll get off your case. How about some knock-knock jokes?" Ellis grinned. "As long as they're dirty." Jastro lifted up his horn and blew a few notes, but Ellis stopped him. "Look, these guys are all hyped up to kill things, Jazz. Don't make them practice on you." Okay. So, where's Grant and the Major?" He looked at his chronometer, featuring dials and sensors capable of all manner of odd things. "Humping, you think?" Major Alex Lee entered the ship. "Ready to waste some bugs, folks?" A roar of approval greeted her words. "Good. But remember, that's incidental to our mission. Our priorities are inside that nest, our appointment with the Queen Mother. Anybody see Daniel Grant around?" she asked. As though he'd taken it as a cue, Grant hurried on. "All right, people," he said. "You can close the access port." The door closed behind him after a touch of a pilot's finger. "Thank you. I just want to say quickly that this is the most exciting day of my life," he said, in a voice that had been clearly exercised much at after-banquet speeches. "Down on this strange world are the secrets that will strengthen our country, perhaps even point us all toward a better future. Down there are the brethren of the creatures that not only are a threat to humanity, but who devastated our beloved homeworld." He paused for dramatic impact. "It's in our hands now, in our power. Let's do our mission, and do it well." A roar of approval arose from the ranks. Grant, smiling like a politician, took his grav chair and belted himself in. Docking struts released, the 500,000-ton lander first parted from the mothership Razia on retros. When it was at a safe distance, its powerful impulse thrusters in, pushing it down and away, deeper into the hold of the Hiveworld's gravity. The USS Anteater descended. The The lander began to rock and jerk violently. As far as Lee could tell, they were still a couple of miles up, but she could make out some of the landscape below. She'd seen pictures of it before, of course, in her studies of this godforsaken planet. Like Mars, the report had said. A few mountains, lots of volcanoes, but for the most part flat and peaked. More atmosphere than Mars. Breathable, even. Not nice, though. Not nice at all. The pictures had clued her into this darkness, the hellish wasteland quality this place had. There was something stricken about it, something unholy. Lee wasn't a religious person, but that was the first word that came to her mind. Unholy. Damned was the second. Shakespeare could have used it for his blasted heath in the play Macbeth. Sure enough, there was a war going on down there. As vicious a war as Alex Lee could imagine. Thousands of struggling bugs going at each other. Fangs and talons. The ruddy landscape was running with alien parts, alien blood, spasming monsters. How long had this been going on? Lee's best guess, offhand, was that this was just the latest of many attacks. She saw alien skeletons littering the landscape. One more battle. Lee unhooked her belt and hurried up to radio the pilots. Okay, fellows, I've got this wonderful idea. You usually use force impellers as well as a few retros to land, correct? That's right. Anything to stop us from using the thrusters to land? That should cook a lot of them pretty good. Sure. Lots of fuel consumption, though, said Fitzwilliam. We just need enough to get back. We've got plenty to spare for that, said Teneras. I could do a configuration of the primaries and tertiaries, and that would do the trick. Good. Then do it. Burn the bastards, and make sure they're well done. Okay. That looks like the main entrance to the hive. Not as close as we'd like, but it's the only option, said Fitzwilliam. That'll be just fine, Lee said, after studying the computer schematics that the pilot had called up on the screen to illustrate the lay of the land. The craft was rumbling and rocking like a son of a bitch. Lee stumble-walked back to her chair, strapped herself in again, and watched the action, eyes gleaming. The anteater slowed down. There was a mighty wrenching as the rockets cut in. She could feel the shift of the ship. It slewed sideways and started down again, catching a bunch of the bugs by surprise. The craft jerked and hung for just a few seconds. Smoke was curling up now past the viewports, obscuring the scene. Then the ship descended again, this time landing on its struts with a wobbling jolt. It swayed, then stilled. All right, grunts, snapped Lee. We've got ourselves an emergency combat landing on our hands. It's showtime. All right, O'Connor, Fitzwilliam's voice crackled through the radio. I've cut the engines. The smoke is pretty much dissipated. Do your duty before any of the things put on their boots and stomp back in. Roger, Skipper. Corporal Seamus O'Connor scratched his beard. He adjusted his grav chair for a better view of the control panel. He'd been training for this moment for months in virtual reality sims. Unfortunately, somehow it wasn't quite the same here. He'd never had Xenos crawling all over the place before. He'd never had a field of dismembered and burnt bugs to negotiate before. What O'Connor operated were the PEHs, the Perimeter Extension Harpoons. The Marines had learned pretty damn quick that in dealing with hostile life forms, i.e. bugs, force fields were quite useful. They'd been in use to a certain extent in the routine humdrum of company galactic life, but as soon as the nasty things with a penchant for destruction were discovered, necessity became the mother of invention again. Power was increased, but in landings like this one, it was rapidly discovered that the fields could only be beamed out a short circumference around the ship. In situations involving the need for expanded territory, their reach had to be expanded. Some kind of fence had to be constructed, utilizing force field generating devices. However, in a theoretical hostile situation, neither men nor robots could be expected to trundle out and erect these posts, hence the harpoons. They'd been tested before in the field, of course, out in deserts and plains, among rocks and what have you. You just played Moby Dick and shot them out to likely-looking spots. When they thunked in properly, you pressed a button for remote control and zap. You had yourself a wide but snug little force field cap within which to work. O'Connor's job now was to get those harpoons out. He touched a button and the ports opened. He did a quick analysis, adjusted the aim, said a prayer, and fired. 4 harpoons, each 7 meters tall and 2 thick, burst from their ports, sailed out into the alien atmosphere, trailing their power cables like baited hooks tossed from fishing rods. They sailed majestically and gorgeously, Come on, you beauties, thought O'Connor. Hit your marks. The sharp points, capable of boring into rock, struck the surface of the alien planet and, marvel of marvels, stuck. Bullseye! O'Connor cried. The radio crackled. No time to rest on your laurels. Looks like those bugs haven't been discouraged much. They're coming back in. No problem. O'Connor leaned over and pulled the switch. Outwall activation has been initiated, O'Connor reported, a note of triumph in his voice. The posts sparked. A shimmer of power traveled down the lines and then spread like electric coloring in water, connecting the posts, the cables, and swirling along the ground. Dozens of aliens caught in the power grid were simply sheared in half. Others heading back in toward the lander simply bounced off the field, limbs and heads bent or smoking. O'Connor grinned to himself and put the field on automatic. He'd done his job. Now the troops were going to have to do theirs. This was why they had worn their suits, so they could go into action at a moment's notice. "We've got some cleaning up to do, people," said Lee, motioning for the troops to hurry along into the hangar deck. "This is what we came to do." The rest of the crew already had their helmets on, so she couldn't see what their faces registered. "It's why we're drawing a salary." She put her own helmet on, tongued on the communications. "Gentlemen," she said, "I do believe we're ready." "Roger, Major. Hatchway opening initiated." The carbines, plasma rifles, and other automatic weapons of the assembled rattled upward, positioning themselves for firing. No depressurization was necessary, however the PSIs were not the same, so there was a distinct escape of air as the hatchway opened. Burnt carbon, burnt silicon, alien acid, never-ending death beneath an eldritch, evil sun. "Come on, people," Lee snapped through her microphone, staccato calling of a parade into battle on shores not made for humans. "Let's make some money." The operation was basically a cleanup proposition. The landing had cindered hundreds of the bugs. The force field perimeter had locked out the remainder. Only about 25 of the aliens had made it past the harpoons before the field crackled on. These were the current targets. These were the bugs that had to be crushed. Vague colorings or internal differences didn't seem to matter. From the way these things acted, all were every centimeter the crazed berserkers their cousins were. Daniel Grant descended to mission control to stand and watch beside Corporal Seamus O'Connor as the monitors flashed the frenetic details of the conflict. Grant felt giddy victory turn his skin to goosebumps. Whatever doubts he'd ever felt about the competency of this batch of Marines disappeared within seconds as the group fanned out in perfect formation, their weapons efficiently blasting away. Out in the open, the alien strategy seemed simple: charge and destroy. The Marine strategy seemed equally simple: blast the things to bits. The Marines acted like precision-sensored robots. Their arms were deadly. Like a phalanx of destruction, they performed this grisly pyrotechnic ballet. Grant suddenly wished for some appropriate music. Sturm und Drang. O'Connor was clearly equally impressed. "Wow," he turned to Dr. Begali. "Those suits you produced are working great. Used to be you couldn't fight these things in such close quarters." "Indeed," Grant noted. Particularly impressive in his efforts was Corporal Erickson. Like some military juggernaut, he moved over the battlescape with fierce speed and agility, his plasma rifle snuffing out aliens and putting them to fiery deaths in what seemed to be like speeded-up film. "Man," Grant said, "look at Erickson go." "Quite something," said Begali. "He's a regular one-man army." Things looked pretty well contained. The rest of the bunch were killing either the last standing alien or raking their weapons across the remains of ones already shot down, making sure they were dead. Jastrow pointed. Sweat dripped down his temples and forehead despite his suit's air conditioning. Lee followed the direction of his forefinger. The Xeno had somehow leapt up to one of the gem-like pilot blisters. Its talons were scratching along the structural spokes and its tail whipped hard against the material, attempting to break through. Even as she stood, considering, Private Ellis puffed up, raising his rifle. "Hold on," said Lee, holding out a halting hand. "Shoot the thing with that, we'll have bug blood all over the hull." She selected what she needed. The thing was like a squarish grenade launcher, with various tangly things extruding. She picked it up, put it up against her shoulder, aimed at the offending alien, and fired. The projectile that shot out progressed half the distance in a blur, but then at the top of its trajectory bloomed out into a net drawn by 3 guided bolos. Expertly directed, they whacked past the bug, scooped it up in the net. Electricity arced and zapped. The bug was pried off its hold and carried off meters away to bounce hard upon the land. It rolled and lay there, just a faint hiss and crackle emerging. "It ain't dead, is it?" asked Jastrow. "Doubt it," said Lee. "The electrical charge in the mesh is probably just enough to stun it." "What should we do?" Lee considered. However, like a bolt out of the blue, before she could do a damn thing, a plasma blast fried the bug in the net. She swung around to see the perpetrator of this, wondering whether to chew the soldier out or thank him. Standing there, looking totally competent and unfazed, was Corporal Henriksen. "It looked like it was about to break free," the man said. "Sorry, Major, but this is a take-no-prisoners operation. Isn't it?" The Major shrugged. "Yeah. Next time, though, check with me." "Sure." She looked around the field of devastation. The bugs were squashed here. Totally. Soldiers, still helmeted and suited up, were carrying burnt and destroyed bodies of the enemy to collect them in a single pile. A vehicle was building a border of dirt around this pile to prevent any possible spread of lingering acid. Although he wore no suit, Daniel Grant had taken the precaution of donning acid-neutralizing boots. What with the lower gravity, though, he did not notice the extra weight or bulk on alien soil. On the other side of the lander, a huge portion of metal had flipped down on hinges, exposing a bank of gleaming guns, a regular arsenal. Grant felt a lilt to his step, a bounce to his walk as he approached. In the command control area, behind this array of weaponry, Sergeant Argento was doing a double check to systems. "Looks like some mean machines here, Sarge," said Grant. "That they are, Mr. Grant," Argento said beneath his drooping black mustache. "What's the plan?" "Pretty simple. We've got about 70 more yards to go before we can start thinking about getting into the hive entrance. Unfortunately, there's a lot of activity going on out there, what with alien species war going on." "So I've noticed. Lovely to see them going at each other instead of at us. So will these shoot high explosive rounds into the creatures and clear some ground?" "Right. Then one of these fires the perimeter extension harpoon into the cleared area. Should come off without a hitch." The silvery weaponry gleamed in the alien sun, sparkling with promise. "Without a hitch. That's right, soldier. That's pretty much what I promised your commanders before we started this trip, and thanks to the wonderful technology here, look where we are now." He walked over and stood just meters away from a black alien, slashing, trying to get its way in. It was like watching a movie. Grant felt totally safe. Piece of cake, he thought. Jastrow had been playing horseshoes outside the lander. He called to Ellis to join him. Lee wasn't quite sure where they'd gotten the stuff, probably fashioned it in the metal shop on board the Razia for just such a possibility, and then stashed the stuff on the Anteater. How the hell can you play horseshoes with that just a few feet away? He gestured to the hordes of ravenous monsters still clawing and hissing with fury. Jastrow shrugged. "Ah, come on. You know as well as I do they can't get through the wall. My only complaint is that you can still smell them." Those two. What a pair. When they'd asked permission to set up the game, Lee's first inclination was to say no. However, the pressures were so much that she not only assented, but went the next step. Why not a picnic? The clouds had cleared, and there was a sun shining through. They'd done the first part of the mission extremely well, and there was still a few hours till the rest of the operation could be properly set up. Jastrow, still fixated on the smell, commented that it made it pretty tough to eat his lunch. Ellis was still fixated on the outside threat. They can't get in here, but pretty soon we're going to have to go out there. And from the looks of things, I'd say they're ready for one hell of a fight. That's another thing. Why are they beating on each other? Jastrow slumped down. Who cares? Back on Earth, they've been trying to kill us for months. Personally, I'm enjoying the view. Henriksen did not participate in the lunch, but also decided to take in the view. Lee and Grant looked on. "That Corporal Henriksen is one amazing soldier," Grant said. "I like to think all my people are, Grant." "I didn't mean to slight any of your troops, Major," Grant clarified. "I just single him out because of what I heard the other night." Lee gave out a bemused laugh. "You mean Jastrow's comments about his being a synth?" Once again, Grant felt the need to clarify. He took a bottle of the Neopharm wonder drug from his pocket. No, I meant what Henriksen said about being so sensitive to this stuff." It's hard to imagine him being more ferocious than he was this morning. So, you don't think Erickson is... Lee interrupted. Isn't that Jastro's Xenozip? Huh? Oh yeah. I meant to give it back to him, but judging from his behavior, he doesn't need any. Jastro stood by the field of the perimeter with his saxophone. He serenaded the aliens with John Coltrane-like freeform squawking, with an occasionally more melodic passage thrown in for fun. He stopped intermittently to observe some of the more brutal assaults the aliens laid upon each other. He wasn't the only one taking a curiosity in the behavior of the alien species. Dr. Begali remained in mission control, observing the activity of the creatures with great focus. It's all rather puzzling, he noted. Perhaps they're executing some sort of population control, like lemmings marching into the sea. He felt the scientific urge to take a closer look. I'm going out to study this phenomenon more closely. O'Connor took him by the arm. You're gonna have to hold off on that, Dr. Begali. I just got the word. The troops were lined up and ready, their helmets back on and properly secured, their weapons cocked, primed, fully loaded, and hungry for action. A silence descended upon the troops, bordered by the buzz of the force fields and the snarling tumult of the fighting aliens between them and the entrance of the Black's monolithic hive. Lee could feel their tension, or was it just her own tension, multiplied by 25? This was going to be the make or break of the mission. Thankfully, the ranks of the bugs had thinned somewhat. Whether many of them had simply been killed or crawled into holes somewhere, she didn't know. She just hoped they hadn't gone into the hive. She tongued her comm. All ready to extend the perimeter. Okay, O'Connor. Drop the southern wall. Lee looked up toward the top of the force field. A wide hole sphinctered, and Argento wasted no time. The big guns thundered. The many millimetered shells sailed out perfectly, hammering onto the landscape. Whole clusters of bugs were destroyed, even more thrown back in the explosions. More shells, differently directed, hammered out of the guns, exploded on the landscape. When the smoke cleared, Lee saw that a wide swath had been cleared. A trail of craters lay in the valley that led up to the opening of the hive. Harpoon away, called O'Connor. The appropriately aimed gun on the side of the lander thumped. Amid an explosion of gases, the harpoon launched. It sailed over their heads swiftly and majestically, trailing its cable like a kite caught in a gale. It threaded the hole in the force field easily and whooshed toward its target. Even back here, many meters away, Lee could hear the large harpoon thunk into place, bearing itself into the ground right on target. A hearty hurrah sounded from the troops. Lee braced herself, getting her rifle ready. Theoretically, when O'Connor pushed the right combination of switches and levers, the force field would move out like an arcing gate, only expanding as it did so, whacking all the bugs en route. However, in the activity, there was always the possibility that one of the aliens would slip through unharmed. That alien would have to be dealt with immediately, hence the preparedness of the troops. The troops moved forward, bullets and plasma leaping out to smack into the survivors. It was all over in a matter of moments, bug pieces scattered to the winds of destruction. The force field wavered. The troops all stopped in their tracks. Lee could feel something wrong before she saw anything. But when she saw it, what was wrong was pretty obvious. The newly planted harpoon was starting to list. What the hell? Oh my god. We couldn't see it when it struck. The thing landed on a couple of intact bugs. That was the only explanation, and the veracity of it and its implications swept through Lee like electricity. Fall back, she cried. The alien acid must be eating through the base. The upright harpoon shifted more, and the force field flickered again. Then the thing toppled, its extended antenna breaking up. The southern force field went down. For a terrible moment, she felt like an EVA astronaut with her suit ripped off. Damn it, Argento. You're going to have to try it again, she screamed. You got it, Major, but I think we should try another tactic. This is tougher than we figured. It's like trying to empty a river with a bucket. We're not going to get them all this way. At first, the surrounding bugs didn't seem to notice. But then, with the damnable speed of their breed, they perceived that the strange, almost invisible wall that had kept them from new prey had evaporated. The soldiers who had gone the farthest out turned to run back. The aliens coming through seemed to sense their fear. They loped forward in attack. Fire, smoke, and tortured screams fill the thin atmosphere of hell. From the safety of the lander, Daniel Grant watches people die. people he had talked to and eaten with and come to respect. All doomed by Neopharm's need for profit. "Shit," said Daniel Grant. He pounded his hand hard against a bulkhead. "Shit, shit, shit." "Steady, Mr. Grant," said Dr. Begali. "I'm sure they've got alternative plans." O'Connor was leaning forward, stabbing at the controls. "God damn it, Argento. Fire the thing. Manually." The voice crackled over the radio. Can't find an opening. The things are swarming back into the crater." "Then make an opening," said O'Connor. "That's what you've got the starboard guns for. Blow 'em off." Grant watched disbelievingly, without a hitch. Falling apart right before his eyes. If those troopers came out of this one without a casualty, it would be a miracle. Grant had never seen such a fight. He'd never before seen his optimism turn to sewage right before his eyes. His stomach turned and he felt as though he was going to throw up. He contained himself, though. He reached down deep for strength. Found it. Lee shouted into the comm. "Hell with the perimeter. Just have him blast those things. Cover the retreat." "I'm sure Argento is doing what he can," Milhone said. Sergeant Argento cursed. He swiveled the gun slightly to the right, concentrated on aiming, and then heard the hissing. Damn. He reached out for his hand weapon and spun around, but it was too late. The bug jumped down from the hull of the anteater like a spider pouncing on its prey. They'd all made it back within the original perimeter, all but one. Private Jastrow was just outside the area, his rifle blasting away. "Jastrow," Lee said. "Step back, damn it! Step back so we can put the field on." The man's radio apparently was not working. He did not respond. He just kept firing away at the things. She was going to have to go out there and drag him back, damn it. She started wading through the pileup of dead bugs, firing away, then stopped dead as she looked back in the direction she was going. The bugs covered Jastrow. One was blasted away, but another took its place. The radio screeched. "Ellis! Ellis, I need some backup! Ellis!" There was a muffled scream, signaling the end of a jazzman's military career. "Argento, start pounding the perimeter wall," Lee radioed. No response. What had happened to the guns, damn it? What was going on? "Argento, screw the perimeter. Fire the mortars into their front lines." Another voice on the radio. "Forget about Argento, Major. His fighting days are over." Shit. Only one recourse now. "O'Connor, reactivate the southern wall. ASAP." "Will do, Major," said O'Connor. "I've got the thing rerouted and I think it's possible." O'Connor leaned forward, hand outstretched toward the switch that would affect the renewal of the force field. Dr. Begali reached forward and stopped him. "Wait," he said. "Wait for what, you maggot? What's going on?" said Grant. "More and more of those things are starting to notice the breach. You've got to close it up. Lives are being lost down there." Grant stood up and pulled Begali back. "What are you trying to do, Doctor?" He felt the rage overcome him. He readied a fist to knock the doctor's lights out. "Go ahead, O'Connor. I'll take care of this turd." But O'Connor paused as well. "No, Mr. Grant. He's right." "Right? What are you talking about? There are too many of those bastards down there. Only thing that's going to kick them out is that gun array. First off, there's going to have to be some place to go to. Second place, using those guns with the force field up full is damn dangerous to the lander. This is what you meant, isn't it, Dr. Begali?" Of course. What else? We've got to get a soldier to the turret guns first." The Major clambered up the stairs and over the body of Argento. She jumped into the seat. Immediately the guns started to swivel, pointing downward at the bugs already inside the force field and those still crawling through. The result was a rout. Between their concentrated wall of blasts and the powerful guns above them, those aliens not smart enough to retreat through the opening of the force field were obliterated. Soon, all that moved among their ruins was smoke. In a matter of minutes, the creatures are repelled. The southern perimeter wall is secured, and 5 Marines are dead. Private Ellis had been looking for his friend. He approached Lee. "Major, have you seen Jastrow? I just heard him shouting a few minutes ago, but I can't find him now." The Major was at a loss for words. Erickson instead approached the private in consolation. "I'm sorry, Alice. There was nothing anybody could do. I really am sorry." The remains of the dead were placed in body bags, zipped tight, and then lined outside the ramp to the anteater. All it would take was the okay from Lee, and they would be carted back into the freezer inside the lander. When the bags lay in a row beside the lander, Major Lee called for a moment of silence for the dead. When that was over, she spoke. "I'd better say something now, because I might be the next one to go into one of these things. These were good people. There will be plenty of time to honor them properly and grieve later. They gave their all to the mission. Others may not recognize their contribution later, but we always will." She bowed her head and observed her own moment of silence. She felt someone looking at her, turned. Daniel Grant was walking down the ramp. "Some business you're in, Grant," she said. "Tell me, how do you figure the deaths of 5 Marines into your overhead?" Then she noticed his face. It was white. "Major, please. I just didn't know. I don't know what to say. Maybe you want to quit." "Wrong," the Major declared. "Marines don't quit, mister. My country sent me here to get something, and I've lost too many people to go home empty-handed now. You'll get what you came here to get, Grant. I just wanted you to know that I don't like it." Meanwhile, Begali finally had his chance to get a closer look. He observed the dead xenomorphs. He approached the powers that be with his own theories. Pardon me, Major, Mr. Grant, but I think I have some good news. I believe that we are witnessing an interspecies war. I can only guess how it happened, but it appears the red creatures are mutations, a separate species from the more familiar black creatures. Thus, it would appear they are fighting for territorial control. Only we never anticipated this kind of scale, or that would hinder our actions to this degree. "Not quite true," said Lee. "We've got the technology, it's just not working as well as we would like." Begali's ferret-like eyes flickered back and forth over those assembled. Despite our feelings of loss and frustration, I cannot forget just how correct my projections were about the recessive gene. Something that was quite unlikely. Naturally, we're sorry for the loss, but after years and years, my science seems to be correct. He tapped his finger emphatically. What we all want is in that hive. It's the answer to our dreams. Maybe, ultimately, even to the whole alien conflict. "Why would you say that?" said Erickson. "We came here to get the Queen Mother Royal Jelly, and we've got to do that. Do you know how much we've been working with in these last 2 decades? About 200 gallons worth, that's all. Our tank here can go up to well over 2,000 gallons, and I'm sure we can fill it. With that amount to work with, all kinds of possibilities will open up. We can learn something, I suppose, from this red and black business. Still, it's all academic curiosity. There are no practical applications yet. With the jelly, those applications may be possible." "Oh? Like what?" said Grant. "The key to genetic control of the aliens. It could be in the Queen down there and her royal jelly. Sorry, Mr. Grant, but there's a lot more at stake here than money for your company and hyperspeed for the armed forces. Why do you think the red aliens are attempting genocide on the blacks?" "Isn't it the same old story? They're different?" Begali shook his head. "You've got to have a certain amount of intelligence to be bigoted. The Xenos aren't that smart. No. It's because, on a very real level, the existence of difference threatens each other. Eradication is programmed into the species. I would dare say that in hives every once in a while, red eggs are laid and immediately destroyed by the queen or queen's guards. When we removed the queen from the black hive and killed her guards, it probably allowed time for these freakish red eggs already laid to develop and grow, and then escape and build their own hive." "Look, this is all very interesting," said Lee, "but how is it going to get us past the war going on down there and into the hive where we can do our job? And get out with our butts intact, I might add." "Yes," said Grant, ruminatively. "A definite priority." Let's look at it this way, then, said Begali. What we have here is warfare on a grand scale. Each of these alien races would like to eradicate the other, annihilate. This mission is deeply embedded in their chromosomal structure. He shrugged. Now, if we just tilt that warfare in the favor of the blacks, that would be to our definite advantage. We don't want mutant jelly, we want the black jelly, the stuff we know something about and can use. It sounded good enough to Grant, but how exactly could they sway the battle in favor of one side? He gestured over to the turrets. But that turret carries our best firepower, and it didn't do a thing. How can we sway the battle? Henriksen interjected. Easy, Mr. Grant. We nuke 'em. Lee looked over to the doctor. Well, a tactical nuclear strike on the mutants' hive would prove most effective. Lee nodded. Well, it would kill off the Red Queen Mother for one thing, and with her any psychic control of her drones, which would send the Red Army into disarray. More than that, said Begali. Without that control, instinctively the Red Army would retreat toward their hive. Equally instinctively, the Black Army would pursue. Grant snapped his fingers, leaving the Black Hive wide open. That would be the theory, yes. It's the best choice, in my opinion, said Begali. We'd still have to deal with the Black Guards, and they will be bigger and fiercer, but they would be limited in number. Of course, we would have to locate the new hive first. That shouldn't be a problem, Lee said. I'll buzz the orbiter to get on it right away. Grant was nodding, his face intent. Good. The sooner we go in, the sooner we can end this. We? Said Lee. You aren't going anywhere, Grant. That's where you're wrong, Major. I am going into that hive with you. You're a civilian. You're not trained for this kind of work. Save it, Major. On a practical level, you need manpower badly. And on a moral level, I need to do this. Can you understand that, Major? If I'm ever to look myself in the mirror again, I need to do this. I feel responsible here. I feel a moral obligation. You need extra people. I can aim a gun and shoot it. Okay, she said. I want... He blinked. What? I said you can go. There's a spare suit about your size in the holding tank in the locker room. We'll go over the situation here in a few minutes. I'll brief you on a few things you'll have to know, and then you can suit up. It'll be good to have you along, Grant. Henriksen and Begali excused themselves to start preparations for the next assault. All right, people, announced Lee. Now that we've got a plan, let's chew over some details. She felt charged again. Those bugs were going to pay. Big time. Daniel Grant was making his way down to the locker room, brain buzzing with the briefing that he'd just received. He entered the familiar smell of the locker, particularly ripe now from the recent press of ripe bodies that had just passed through. Where was it that Lee said the spare suit was? Oh, yes, over in the cabinet yonder. No lock, no latch. Sabotage was the last thing on Grant's mind. He was so preoccupied with the lessons he'd learned about alien killing. He opened the door and saw the suit and reached for it. What he did not see was the alien egg pod sitting in the shadows. The thing stood like an obscene, fleshy orchid bulb. Grant smelled it before he saw it, that now familiar intense acidic blast of stench. As he reached for the suit, his foot stubbed against the growth. It gave like a stink cabbage. He looked down. At first, he didn't want to believe his eyes. Then he saw the tangle of talons wiggling at the opening of the bulb, like the beginnings of a sand crab emerging from its shell. He froze. It hissed at him and began to come out faster, bending the petals of its deadly flower as it came. It launched, directly for his face. Sheer desperation somehow prized the freeze lock off his muscles. Off to his right was a hanging suit. He reached out, grabbed it, and pulled it in between himself and the facehugger. It bounced off it and flopped onto the floor. Grant had just enough time to let off a yelp and take a step away from the thing before it animated again, leaping up toward him as though its legs were spring-loaded. As though his face were metal and the thing were a magnet, it headed straight for his eyes. He reached out and caught it. The talon-like claws tore at his skin. The pain shot up his arm, causing him to throw the thing down. It hit the floor, but it clearly had discovered its mission. It jumped around and was about to leap back at him when a blur flashed off to the left and a suited foot kicked it square in its crabby ass. A rifle went up, tracked, sighted. Energy sizzled out. The blast smacked it like the finger of God, smushing a demon. Some of its acid came out, bubbling a small hole in the floor, but most was consumed in the incendiary blast. He stepped back, his legs hit a stool. He sat down hard. "Thanks," he said. "You saved my ass, soldier." "Just my job," the person said, with bite. He looked over to his savior. It was Major Lee. "Looks like one of your pets wandered off the beaten track," she said. Grant shook his head. "I don't understand. I only authorized one creature for incubation." He drew in a breath, savoring it. "Take a look in the armory closet there." The closet. Grant nodded. "That's where the thing came from." She looked and grunted. "Yep, you got yourself a pod here, Grant. I was the only one not armored, so it's obvious this thing was planted to get me when I came back here." He smacked a fist into a palm. "It's got to be Begali. You must still be working for those scumbags at MedTech. I want you to put that bastard under arrest, or hang him." "Yo, rein yourself in, Grant, and come here and take a look at this." Grant walked over reluctantly. He looked in the closet. Lee was pulling something off the side of the pod. She pulled it into view. "You know what this is, right?" In her hand she held some kind of metal clamp attached to a bottle-shaped thing. "Of course," said Grant. "It's a timer clamp. It's used to hold the lips of an egg shut to ensure the creature can't escape during transportation. And it automatically falls off when the timer expires," she continued for him. "The planter is nowhere near the eggs when it activates. Looks like it's got a motion sensor on it, too. Anyone could have walked into this trap." "So? So anyone could have planted this egg?" She stood up. "Even me." He shook his head. "I still don't feel good about that guy Begali. He's been acting strangely." Lee sighed. "He seems clean to me. Anyway, he's the only alien expert in the landing party, and he's been giving us good information, by my lights. Maybe you don't know this, but all radio signals are scrambled by the content of the shell in those hives. Once inside, we'll have no communication with the lander. We're going to need that bastard in there more than any other crew member. Without him, this operation is dead in the water. You still want me to bust him?" Grant thought about this. He didn't like it, not at all. At the same time, he well knew that Lee was right. Begali knew his stuff, and they needed someone with knowledge of the inner workings of the Alien Queen's chambers and what any change in the norm might mean. "No, I guess you're right." "Good. I'm glad we're agreed on that." She started out of the room. "I'm going to get the team ready for our push. Take a break, have a cup of tea, but if you're coming with us, I want to see you out there in an hour. Capiche?" "Yes. And Major Lee..." "Alex. Again, thanks." The tactical nuclear weapon struck the red alien hive dead on. Lee watched the event inside the lander on the screen from the Razzia's perspective. These tactical strikes had an extremely limited radius of effect, with minimal fallout and radiation, but nonetheless they had carefully ascertained the weather conditions beforehand. Everything had been perfect for the strike. The execution had been precise and professional. "Good shooting," she told Hastings. And she went outside where the troops were waiting for her. They had heard the news on their radios and were cheering. "Just the start, people," she said as she strode into their midst. "The uphill road is ahead." She already noticed that the ranks of the battling aliens had thinned out somewhat. What's going on out there? Just seconds after destination, the Reds just kind of stopped whatever they were doing and started spasming. "Lots got killed, I think, and lots more are starting to take off," reported Milhone. "Whatever psychic link they had with their Queen Mother must have been broken when the bitch got wasted," said Erickson, nodding. Lee visualized that moment of intense destruction. The impact as that multi-megaton nuke tore through the chambers of the Reds, decimating all in it, shrieking corroming nuclear wind. Had Queenie gotten off one final scream of agony, one bitter nasty farewell to her evil crew? Lee hoped so. She hoped that the bitch knew who'd been responsible. She was only sorry the thing didn't have a little picture of her to take down to bug hell with her. Lee turned to where Grant stood, looking uncomfortable and anxious in his suit. Doubtless he was regretting his volunteering for the move into the hive. He'd be okay, though. He had the stuff. "There it is," said Erickson, putting down the pair of binoculars and pointing. "You don't need glasses to see that baby." Sure enough, off to the east she could see the telltale mushroom cloud rising up past the horizon of this flat, bleak landscape. Black and poisonous. "They're taking off in droves," someone shouted. Lee swiveled. Sure enough, the Reds seemed totally disinterested in the conflict now. They were taking off in waves, racing away back toward their blasted hive. Why? Instinct? Whatever the reason, it wouldn't do them much good. Still, Lee was pleased. They wouldn't be hanging around here. The blacks hung back for a moment, perplexed. Then, as though the thunderbolt of realization had hit them, they started after the enemy who had attempted to destroy them, totally ignoring the interlopers behind the shielded vessel from another planet. "Yes," said Lee, stamping the ground with unalloyed glee. Just as planned. "It worked," she said. "The Reds are retreating to the other hive. This one should be clear in a few minutes." Grant was fidgeting. He clearly wanted this all to be over. "Then let's get moving. Who's going in?" "Everyone but the technical crew," said Lee. "And Ellis." "Makes sense," said Grant. "He's taking Jastro's death pretty hard." "Yeah," said Lee. "They grew up together, joined the Corps together, and fought for years in the same units. He's a good Marine. He'll be okay in a few days. But I'd rather not have him in close combat right now. Besides, someone has to man the guns." She walked over to the bank of guns poking out the side of the lander. "How are you doing up there, Private?" "All set, Major." Luckily, they'd trained all the troops to use these things. "Right. I'm sure you'll do just fine." She turned back and walked toward Grant. "How about you, Grant? You gonna be okay?" "Don't worry about me, Major. I can take care of myself." "Good. It'll be good to have you along." "All right, then. Helmets on." She fitted her own on above her suit, clicked in the radio, waited for the rest of the troops to check in. When they did, when it was all finished, she chinned her radio again. "Okay, O'Connor." The troops lifted their guns, released the safeties. "Drop the southern border." They moved out. There were still a few red aliens lingering about, and these charged in when they got a whiff of the intruders. But this sort of fight is what the Marines expected on the alien homeworld, what they're used to. It is not a battle they execute, but a swift and brutal vengeance for their comrades lost. Meanwhile, Ellis and O'Connor were doing damned fine work with the PEHs. They spiked a few home to either side of the hive's opening, and moments later the Marines had a nice tunnel of force field to make their way through, cleaning up the couple of Xenos left over and not having to worry about the ones who'd been excluded from the party. When they reached the opening of the hive, Lee put a hand up, halting the party. "What's the reading say, O'Connor?" she asked through the radio. "Sensors show they're still on the run. No parties coming back." "Good news." She turned to the group. "I don't know how long we've gotten there before the three bears come home, but I do know we're going to go in there and get us some porridge." Laughter. Cheers. "However, let's be quick about it, okay? No sightseeing, no rubbernecking. We picked up enough DNA from dead Reds already, so we don't have to pack anything in ice. Moreover, we don't have to take them back alive. Now, as we discussed before, what we're going to be up against in there are some pretty nasty bugs, bigger and smarter. Take this into account." She got back on the radio. "O'Connor, drop the new southern border, and send up the cargo drone." That was what they were going to be using to carry the royal jelly back up with. "This is the last radio contact till we get back out," said Lee. "Open her up, O'Connor. Over and out." They started down. The tunnels were recognizably of alien origin. Lee had seen plenty of hive tunnels, that was for certain. Nonetheless, these were a little larger than usual, with a different consistency of building material. "I've never seen an alien nest so empty before," said one of the soldiers. "I have," said Lee grimly. And it was a trap. The nest on Hollywood and Vine. It was flashing back on her. The walls, like the inside of a tumorous colon. There was a convergence of tunnels. 3 separate ways to go. Okay, Dr. Begali, get your butt in that machine up front. Dr. Begali shuttled forward. In his hand he held a device with a pair of green sensor extensions, a pheromone detector. Begali tapped a few buttons and pointed the device in each of the directions in turn, scrutinizing the results carefully. "Well, Doctor?" said Lee. "Which way to the buried treasure?" The helmet bobbed eagerly. "Well, the pheromone readings seem to jibe with what I expected." He pointed to the left. "Let's try that way." They started down the corridor. "This is why we need Begali," she told Grant. "The hive is much larger than any I encountered on Earth. Without him, it'd take days to find the Queen Mother." Grant shook his head. "If you say so, Major, but I still say the creep is very dangerous." "Major," said Private Milhone, "the motion detectors show significant and sudden activity up ahead." "Begali!" Lee yelled. "Get your ass back here." Just then, the suited Dr. Begali returned around the bend where he'd disappeared. Lee could hear him screaming without benefit of the radio. She didn't know the little guy could move so fast, let alone that fast with the hindering weight of a full battlesuit on. He ran past them, toward the cover of the cargo drone carrier. "Begali!" said Grant. "What the hell is it?" Lee didn't have to ask. She could pretty much guess. "Arms!" she yelled. "The Queen Mother's elite guard. Psychically linked to the matriarch, they are released only when she senses extreme danger. It was big, and it was fast, and it was mean. The Marines were warned about these especially vicious creatures. No team of soldiers could be better prepared or better equipped to battle the super aliens. The blasts caught it full in the chest, and it kept on coming for what seemed like a full second before it was lifted up and slammed against the wall. It tried to scrabble back up and tackle them again, before a final plasma stream knocked its head apart. "There's more!" yelled the point man. "There's—" The next one was even bigger, and even faster. Before they could swing their weapons away from the first and onto the new arrival, it was on the first soldier. Horrible claws tore the man's chest apart. Lesser soldiers might have lost it right then, so horrific was the sight. But they kept their cool, aimed their weapons, and let the thing have it. 2 more guards attacked. Another soldier was torn apart before the guards were subdued, blasted to pieces. In all her time fighting inside hives, Lee had never seen such an intense battle conflagration. The Queen's guards were incredibly quick and agile, almost imbued, it seemed, with superpowers. Fortunately, this crew was also the best she'd worked with. Within violent minutes, 4 aliens and 2 humans lay smoking and quite dead upon the ground. "God," was all that Private Milhone could say, lying slumped against the wall, gasping for air and still grasping her weapon, ready if another bug should care to call. "No, I don't think God's around here," said Erickson. "This is more like the other place." For her own part, Lee was just numb. "Okay, we'll pick the bodies up on the way back. Take a moment for a breather, because that's all the time we've got if any of us wants to get out of here." 2 more dead. She couldn't believe it, even when she looked down at their twisted and torn remains. This wasn't worth it, but she had her orders, and she had her duty, and she knew nothing more than that she had to complete this mission, or the lives and the lives lost earlier, and the months spent on this project would have been for naught. A suited figure peeked around the corner of the cargo drone. Is everyone all right?" Dr. Begali. Apparently his head had been well stuffed in the sand. Daniel Grant, who had been leaning on the side wall, exhausted, pushed himself off and walked over to the man. "No. 2 more dead. You couldn't have warned us this would happen?" "We knew about the guards. What we didn't know was that they'd come charging up at us like that," said Lee. Grant grabbed the doctor. "Come on, you little bastard. You're taking us to the Queen Mother's chambers, or I'll blow your head off." The electric torches stabbed down into the darkness, but beyond their reach, Lee saw the beginnings of what appeared to be some kind of bioluminescence. "Okay," she said. "This place has had a few surprises that we weren't prepared for. There still might be more. Dr. Begali, Corporal Erickson, Daniel Grant, and myself will head down to the chamber. Dicer, Clapton, and Milhone stay here and guard our backs. I don't expect the radios to work, so let's say if we're not back here in an hour, get back to the lander and get out of here." "Yes, sir," they chorused. Lee took the controls of the drone from a trooper and motioned the party onward. It took another 10 minutes to get down to a place where the lamps were necessary to see. Still, Lee kept the sidelights of her suit on, just in case things suddenly went dark. The tunnel went around a bend, suddenly opened up. It was the biggest chamber that Lee had ever seen. Eerily lit by the bioluminescence was the scene that the scientists had more or less predicted. The 4 huge pods radiating around a larger pod, above which the Queen towered, a true giant, like a devil tilted atop her evil throne. Only the sketchy holograms could never have hinted at the textures or the colors, the bizarre organic geometry here that threatened to drive a mind mad if concentrated on too closely. The Queen's pod glistened and oozed with what Lee knew to be royal jelly. The stuff that would make Grant an incredibly rich man, that would give the armed forces what they wanted, that would spell a success to this bloody campaign. "Incredible," said Grant. However, his eyes did not glow with avarice. "Amazing," said Lee. "We've hit the motherlode of royal jelly here." She looked at Grant. "You're gonna get your tank filled, I think." "Little problem," said Grant. "What about Queenie?" The gigantic creature perched atop the center mound did not even seem to notice they were there. Its attention seemed focused off into space, as though it were meditating. "I'm sure it's psychically directing the route of the Reds," said Begali. "Must be. It's so absorbed it didn't even notice the death of its guards." He quickly scanned the room again. 4 pods, 4 guards. Excellent correspondence. Looks like we've got this place all to ourselves. All we have to do is deal with the Queenie, and she's just a sitting duck." He smiled broadly, skipping a little closer to the gleaming, gooey treasure hoard. "Looks delicious, doesn't it?" He drifted closer to the pod. "Look at it all. I never thought I'd see this much up close. God, it's beautiful." "Beautiful?" said Grant. "I'm not so sure anymore. 8 good people died for that crap. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "But, Mr. Grant, sir, this expedition was your idea." "Yeah, and I'll have to live with myself for making such a horrible mistake. I was careless, ignorant, and inhumanly selfish. But you, Begali, you're evil. Try to deny that. You've been sabotaging this mission from day one, haven't you?" "What?" said Begali, turning back to him. "Come off it. I've been watching you, Begali, and I know damn well you're up to something," said Grant. "You're still working for MedTech, aren't you?" "Okay, sure. I have been up to something." He took a breath. "I'm doing research, independent of Neopharm. I'd planned to publish articles on my findings." "Articles?" "A new kind of alien. I'd go down in history. I'd be famous. Forever." "Articles," repeated Grant. "I've got more than enough money, Grant, and I always hated MedTech. What I want is to be acknowledged for my scientific efforts. That's why I wanted to come down here. Maybe I'll even write a book. Yes, a bestseller." "You heard it, Grant," said Lee. "The only thing he's guilty of is scientific greed. Now back off." "So how do you know he isn't lying?" Grant started to say, before a sudden hissing shriek froze his sentence. Without warning, the Queen Mother jumped. It sailed through the air, and it landed just short of Dr. Begali. Stunned and disbelieving, Begali tried to turn. A long set of secondary jaws streaked out from the alien's mouth, slicing and hammering into the back of the scientist's head, boring through and pushing his eyes out of their sockets like red jello being squeezed through cookie cutters. Lee was stunned. The thing wasn't supposed to be able to do that. Wasn't its ovipositor fastened to the pod? But then, wasn't that just something else they didn't know about these aliens? Only a flicker of a second thought, though. Already her rifle was going up, aiming, squeezing off a round. Erickson fired at the exact same moment. Their fire converged upon the exact same spot on the Queen. It hissed and wailed, a hole blown through its thorax. Its blood rained down upon Begali's head and boiled his face away. The alien started toward them, forelimbs clutching and seeking. Lee lifted her rifle and aimed at its head. It still came forward. Henrikson's blasts joined hers, and the thing's head burst asunder like a ripe melon. They backpedaled to avoid the spurting acid, and the Great Queen Mother writhed and spasmed in its death throes. Lee stepped forward, looking down at the massive thing. Fortunately, it had come far enough that it hadn't spoiled its own jelly. "Right," she said. "Too bad about Begali. Let's get this tank loaded out here, quick. I hope this will be enough, she said sardonically. Yes, said Grant. Yes, it will have to do, I suppose. Something wrong, Grant? I think you know what's troubling me. The man sighed deeply. Besides, I don't get it. Only a few people knew about the alien incubation project. If Begali didn't sabotage it, who did? Casually, Alex Lee grabbed a hold of her rifle. She'd been thinking about that very same thing. She was about to turn when Henrikson's voice sounded behind them. Thank you, folks. That looks just fine, he said. Please drop your weapons. This close, one blast of this rifle can deal with you both. Henrikson? Said Grant. He knelt and put his rifle down behind him. You? That's right, Grant. MedTech pays a lot better than the Marines. Damned interesting ride, too. Been enjoying myself. He motioned with the tip of his rifle. Come on, Major. Sir. Get that pretty finger off the trigger and set your gun down. She obeyed. You're gonna kill us and leave us here, aren't you? Absolutely. And no one will be the wiser. And by the time we get back to Earth, a goodly part of this royal jelly will be siphoned off. And some of the DNA samples will be gone as well. Just in case, I dare say, once it's been announced you've been killed in action, your creaky empire will be up for grabs. And the Neopharm scientists will pretty much disperse. The best ones bought up by MedTech. I checked your credentials, damn it. They were spotless, said Lee. She knew there was somebody giving them trouble, but she'd always felt she could contain any problems. She thought she'd read this guy, that he was straight as an arrow. He'd given absolutely no previous sign of disloyalty. Hey, you've got an eminently corruptible bunch you're working for, Lee. The man was grinning maliciously now, savoring his victory. What? Are you really a synth, Henrikson? Said Grant, clearly just as shocked as Lee at this turn of events. And no wonder. Henrikson had been Grant's main man, his apple polisher. He'd brought him down to show him the alien incubation. There'd been a trustworthiness about the guy. A big brotherness. Why hadn't they seen through him, damn it? He thought. The grin got broader. There's where MedTech has your company beat all to hell, Grant. Every day I douse myself in a special pheromone, designed specifically for leader types to sniff. Makes you trust me. Gives type A's like you confidence in big guys like me. That's why the other grunts didn't care for me. They weren't the kind to like this pheromone. You guys bought it. But you've risked your life with all the rest of us. You've been a damned good soldier, said Grant. Yes, I have, and I've had a good time too, folks, let me tell you. I am a soldier of fortune. I raid alien nests with buddies for money. I'm an independent and damn good at it. Only there's more money in this for me than I'd ever dreamed of. And I get to see the stars, too, he shrugged. Don't look for anything deeper here. That's all there is. But the death of the alien baby, that pod, the sabotage, it just doesn't add up. Sure it does, Grant. I caused confusion. I hurt the program and I pretty much framed poor old Begali. In fact, when I get back with this liquid gold here, that's what I think I'm going to tell them. Yeah, it was Begali, guys. He's dead now, though, along with poor old Grant and Lee. Boo-hoo. Mission complete. Now let's get the hell out of here. You see? Piece of cake. He started laughing. Unless Lee acted, they'd be dead within seconds. However, since they'd all taken off their helmets, there might be a shred of hope here. Without a further thought, Lee dived for her rifle. She scooped it up, put her finger under the trigger, and was blasted by the quadruple barrels of Henrikson's weapon. Grant watched in horror as the blast hit Lee's left thigh. She spun around and fell hard onto the ground. The next thing Grant knew, he was on top of Henrikson. The man had been swerving his rifle for the coup de grace, but Grant's fist sailed into the man's bare face with a solid impact before he could pull the trigger again. Where that had come from, Grant didn't know, but it felt so good that he found himself doing it again. The attack surprised Henrikson so much he clearly wasn't sure what to do. To defend himself at close quarters, he'd have to drop the rifle. But Lee wasn't dead yet, and to give up the weapon meant certain defeat. He lifted his other arm, but Grant countered, and nailed him with another punch. Grant kicked the rifle away from him, and then booted him in the head again, hard. The lights in those bright blue eyes dimmed. You don't smell so good to me anymore, Henriksen. A groan from behind him. He picked up Henriksen's weapon and went over to Major Lee. She moaned. I think my hip is broken. Indeed, there was a smoking hole in the overplating of the hip area of the suit, exposing underpart beneath. Yes, said Grant. The underplating of this armor is designed to withstand severe concussions. Still, you're probably right about that hip. You're going to need some help. He helped her up. Yeah, thanks, she cringed. I'll make it. Good. Looks like you did a number on Henriksen there. Surprised you didn't take his rifle and blast him. Don't think the thought didn't enter my mind. Now, if we get him back, I'll be able to use him to string MedTech up by its dangling prescriptions. Sounds good. We go now? We go. They revived Henriksen with a few slaps across the chops, and then they made sure that he knew which direction their rifles were pointing. Grant propped Lee up on the sideboard of the drone. She could walk, sort of, but he figured he'd better save that for later. The suit was getting too heavy for him, so he took off the top. Helmets? She said. Forget the helmets. We've got enough weight to slow us down as it is. At least stick them up here on the drone, damn it. Yes, sir. He had Henriksen do that. The traitorous corporal performed the task grudgingly, without comment. The creatures should be miles from here, said Grant. They started trudging back the way they'd come, with him keeping a beat on Henriksen while Lee controlled the cargo drone. They were just at the tunnel opening at the end of the chamber when they heard the rumbling. What the hell? Said Henriksen, looking behind. It's coming from that other tunnel, on the opposite end of the chamber. Oh shit, said Lee. Grant watched, disbelieving, as an alien ran into view in the dimly illuminated distance, followed by another, followed by 3, 4, a clot of the monsters burst out of the tunnel. They must be coming back through another entrance, said Lee. They must have sensed the death of their queen, damn it, and started to head back. And took a shortcut. Well, let's get a move on here. He'd taken his attention off Henriksen for one moment, one short moment, and had been rewarded by the big man. Big time. Henriksen's body plowed into his, knocking Grant down, bashing the rifle from his hands. It clunked down beside him, and Grant grabbed it up again. Henriksen jumped on top of him, and they wrestled for the gun. They were on the other side of the cargo drone, away from any chance of Major Lee interceding immediately. For Christ's sake, you asshole, said Grant. They're almost on top of us. I'm gonna make it out of here, Grant, said the big man. I'm gonna be the only one who does. As they struggled, the bottle of Xenozip fell out of Grant's pocket, cracking open on the alien floor beside him, spilling its contents. Grant took a look at the groaning Henriksen and the fallen bottle of Xenozip, and then at the approaching aliens. You want the gun so bad, Corporal? Take it. He swung the weapon across Henriksen's face, knocking him to the ground. Grant scooped up a handful of the pills, and he stuffed them into Henriksen's mouth, holding his hands over the man's lips so he was forced to automatically swallow them. And here's a special bonus. He turned to Lee. Get yourself on the front of that drone, and let's get the hell out of here, he said. What are you waiting for, Major? Start lobbing those grenades. What about Henriksen? Don't worry about him, Major. He's capable of taking care of himself. Grant put the rifle down between the corporal's arms, and then he grabbed Lee's arm and helped her over to the lander. The man's eyes popped open. Inside, he felt as though an atom bomb had just gone off in his brain. He rolled his head and saw, just meters away, a horde of charging, hissing aliens. In his arms was a rifle. Fire raged through his bloodstream and nervous system. He felt the familiar flight-or-fight response, only flight didn't seem necessary. Henriksen, after all, was God. And in his hands was a fistful of lightning bolts. Grinning, he got up as the aliens approached. "Come on, you bastards," he screamed. "Let's play." He'd kill them all. Then he'd go back up and nail that bastard Grant and that bitch Lee. Yeah. The gun in his hand started blazing. The 3 soldiers were still waiting for them patiently where Lee had placed them. Seeing them there was a great relief, a testament to her ability to judge people. The cargo van kept going, rolling along with a few more guards. Behind them, she could still hear the echoes of Henriksen's blazing gun. Then it stopped, and there was a shriek the likes of which she'd never heard before. They rolled out, and there, like a delightful promise, was the anteater, patiently waiting for them. With her excitement, Lee could almost ignore the pounding pain in her hip. Grant chinned the radio on. "O'Connor, drop all the walls of the perimeter and tell Captain Nash to start the engines." He gasped for a breath. "Prepare for an emergency liftoff." They hightailed it. Grant fired upon the alien pursuers. But there were so many of the things that they just kept on coming, regardless, and coming too damn fast. "It's no use," Lee panted. "We'll never make this ship. They're almost on top of us." Grant lowered his head, gasping for air. "You know what I hate about you, Major? You're always right." Private Ellis started blasting from the turrets. The shells devastated whole sections of the emerging aliens. Ellis called out, "Come on, you two. Move those VIP butts." They were almost there. Somehow they made it to the ramp. The drone rolled up like a champ. "Fold up shop," cried Lee. "Ellis, get your butt in here." The hydraulic struts of the ramp started squealing up, hauling up the platform. Through another door, Private Ellis raced in, still clutching his dead friend's saxophone. "Closing up the guns." "Damn, we've got nothing to shoot them with now," said Lee, hopping off the cargo drone, letting the side serve as her crutch. "Engines firing." "The damned hatch has to close first," she cried. Then, a flicker of nightmare. Talons scrambling for a hold on the ramp, coming up now like a castle drawbridge in the face of vandals. The too familiar banana-shaped head, the drooling fangs. A hissing insinuated through the sound of the hydraulics. Guns raised to shoot the alien scrabbling in. "No!" cried Ellis. "The blood will perforate the door. We won't be able to lift—" Suddenly, an idea. "Hell," he said. "I can't play the damn thing anyway." With all his might, he threw the saxophone. Its metal base bashed directly into the alien's head. The creature was knocked off the door, and it closed, tightly and firmly, no alien blood acid eating through it. The lander rumbled and throbbed, and Lee could feel its rockets kicking off this foul planet's dust with fiery disgust. Lee was lying in bed, with a beautiful view of the stars through a viewport window. She was safe and sound, and a few simple, non-addictive drugs were running through her system, killing the pain of her fractured thigh. The mission was complete. The Corps was going to be happy, and maybe she'd even get a promotion. She felt the loss of her troops heavily, but then she'd lost people before. Old hat. The emptiness went away. Eventually. She felt no imminent sense of danger. She had some books to read and some vids to watch. Why, then, Major Alexandra Lee asked herself, did she feel so bored and antsy? This should be a time to celebrate. After they'd gotten the anteater safely back on the Razzia and offloaded the tank, they realized they had 2,500 gallons of the stuff. Grant's scientists were totally blissed. It was enough to work with and absolutely top quality. No sign of that red strain whatsoever. There was a good chance now they could even create their own Queen Mother. They'd nuked the Black Hive as a parting shot. There were probably Xenos left on the planet, but it would take a long, long time to regroup. Lee imagined one playing a soulful sax as its hive burned. Turned out, according to Friel and the others, this whole Red Aliens thing was a fluke. The Queen Mother and the Queens were dead now, and all their eggs. They'd never come scratching on their door again. The generic brand, though, they'd be around. They were the universe's cockroaches, with a vengeance, and she'd helped step on her share. A time for rest and relaxation and recuperation. A time for peace and meditation and whatever. So it was that when Daniel Grant came to see her later that day, she was overjoyed at his visit, though she'd be damned if she'd let him know how much. "So, you'll be okay?" "Yeah, just a hairline fracture. 5 weeks in the sleeper tube and I can start physical therapy on Earth." "Good. I'm pleased. Very pleased." His eyes seemed to drift toward the stars and into abstraction. "You come here to talk about something?" "Nothing in particular. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." "I'm fine." "Nothing more?" "Well, everyone seems to be on the emotional mend. A lot of people are just sleeping, I guess in reaction to all the stress." "And you? What are you doing? Taking any baths in your royal jelly yet?" No. Waiting for you." He laughed. The scientists are just tickled pink. They've already started to work on it, along with the samples of the red alien DNA. They say maybe they really have got something here. I hope so. We had to dole out a few lives for it. I'm gonna make sure that those lives were not lost in vain, Alex. Actually, you know, maybe there was something I wanted to talk to you about. Shoot, I'm not going anywhere. I was impressed by your work here. When we get back, I'm probably going to need someone to head up a security team for Grant Industries. The job is yours, if you want it. She laughed. And leave the Marines? No way. I've got a mission in life, Grant, and it's not to guard your butt. He shook his head. I don't understand, Alex. How much longer can you do things like this mission? How long do you think you can survive? I don't know any other kind of life. Except what? Except for maybe when I was a little girl. Yeah. I had a real good life when I was a kid, Grant. Perfect. And then, a bunch of monsters came down and destroyed that life, and destroyed a lot of lives. She shook her head. Think about it, Grant. Think about it while you're sitting up there in your ivory tower when you get back. This may seem like hell to you. It's pretty rough, sure. That mission was one of the roughest. But chew on this. Most wars get fought between people arguing over some relatively silly matter, usually involving money or land or possessions. People kill people. It's stupid, senseless, and a waste. History is drowned in the shed blood of martyrs for meaningless causes. I don't know if I'm even going to make any history books, Grant, but I do know that whatever I accomplish against this plague, against decent life, this evil that has infected the galaxy, it's not meaningless. She took a deep breath. Now, how many people can be positive, absolutely feel it to their toes sure, that their lives mean something? That as full as foibles as they are, they're living and fighting for something good. Grant seemed to consider that for a moment. I can't argue much about that, Alex. But we all can't be Joan of Arc. Somebody's got to get the engines of commerce running. Somebody's got to be in charge of those engines. Well, maybe you've got a different view of things now that you've looked at life through the jaws of one of the monsters coming at you. Sure. Of course, now I've got to figure out how to look at life without worrying about mobsters or medtech. She laughed. I'm sure the generals and admiral back home will be so pleased you'll have no problem, Grant. I don't know. I just hope that what we've done on this journey does make a difference. If I could do the whole thing over again, I wouldn't do it at all. Not at the cost of 11 good kids. She smiled. Oh yeah, I forgot. You're a changed man. I've been watching you, Grant. I think it already has made a difference. Jelly or no jelly. Thanks. I guess maybe you're right. You're very hard to win over, Major Lee, which is why I'm glad you're on my side. It's been a long, hard, horrible day, but I feel I've come away from all this a wiser, better person. See? You really can learn something new every day. Aliens Genocide was written by John Arcudi with its story by Mike Richardson and the novelization by David Bischoff. The art in this series was by Damon Willis, Carl Story, and Arthur Sudum. The story first appeared as a 4-part arc published by Dark Horse Comics from 1991 to 1992. This would be the first time the Aliens comic series would move beyond the stories following Newt, Hicks, and Ripley, now exploring new characters and the larger story that had been laid out with the Earth War. The aftermath of the war would continue to be a prominent backdrop to the stories to follow. And though Daniel Grant and his company were successful in their mission, there would be continued pursuits of the elusive royal jelly. In this series, I'm recounting events taking place in the aftermath of the Earth War, as depicted in the comics and novels. For more on the Earth War, and beyond the Earth War, please see the playlist on the end screen and in the description below, and stay tuned for the latest videos. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and be sure to subscribe for all the latest videos from Alien Theory. A very special thanks goes out to Alyssane, Grizz4756, Ronnie Jensen, and Xenomorph, Queen Tiers of the Patreon Hive. Thank you to Gregory Ford and John Griggs, the Hive's Praetorians. A very special thanks goes out to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley tier of excellence, and in the role of Weyland Yutani Executive, NanashiFx. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.